Right, hello everyone. So what's this lengthy video about? Well, to explain, because if you watch this in the future, it won't make a lot of sense. I'm currently in the middle of recording the playlist of Dr. Dave Regis's recommended openings for juniors. And Dr. Regis recommends E4. And obviously, therefore, he has to recommend some various things to play against E5. Knight F3 is what he suggests. And that does mean you have to have something against the Latvian Gambit. And Dr. Regis recommends knight e5. Quite rightly, it's the strongest move of several perfectly good moves and slight advantage white, blah, blah. And if you see that video in that playlist, you'll see that the good doctor gives 5 or 6 pretty quick white victories where black makes a total dog's dinner of it. But I have a bit of a soft spot for the Latvian Gambit. And as a junior player, I have to say I only ever lost one competitive game with it. And even that was because I just completely forgot a bit of theory and played a move out of order and got myself into trouble. What I can say about the Latvian Gambit is at top level, grandmaster level, it's just not sound. White will know what they're doing and they will win. But anything sort of, I would say, FIDE master level downwards, it's really quite dangerous. You could get yourself into an awful pickle. And there are some FIDE master, maybe even international master strength players that do play it. The problem is that in this day and age, with computer analysis, all of the mystery and fun of this completely insane opening has kind of been taken out of it because the computers can just analyze it to death. But I thought I would take you through a few of my better games with it, some of my wins as a junior, because it's just carnage. It's just such wild stuff, to the point where there was a season where opponents playing me would just avoid it. They actually wouldn't play E4 against me with the white pieces, just because they knew I was going to play the Latvian and they didn't want to know. So it was that dangerous. And I'm not making that up. It's absolutely true. So let's see some games with the Latvian Gambit, some games where black actually wins. But I say I'm not recommending it as a stock opening for anybody these days, but it's great fun to play blitz and bullet games with it because it's wild. I'm going to turn the board around because we may as well look at the Latvian Gambit from the black point of view, because it really is a black opening. So E4, E5, knight F3, F5. And I'm going to leave the lines on up here, because the computer at some points will completely change its mind. It'll sit and think for 30 seconds and then go, yeah, actually, that's rubbish after all, or no, this is a good move after all. So this first game is from 1996, April 96. I'm 16 years old, and it's in a tournament called the Sir William Dupree Open. So it was an annual sponsored tournament for junior players in my area. And the guy I'm playing here was, not now, it's 25 years ago. That's a scary thought. As I record this, it was 25 years ago. Boo-hoo. He was definitely one of the stronger players in the county, and he took one look at the Latvian Gambit and did not want to know. And he just played D3. And if you play the Latvian, you will get this a lot. You will get opponents that have no idea what they're supposed to do. And so they just bottle it. And I got to be honest, if you ever get an opening as black where white is only 0.2 after the first 3 moves, you're happy with life. So D6, knight to C3, knight to F6. I'm just reading this from my old tournament books and my old notes, so hopefully I won't have any mistakes or typos in here. G3. Knight to C6, bishop to G2, and now I play pawn takes pawn, which the computer says is okay. Knight takes pawn. I think the computer will probably have preferred pawn takes, but whatever. And I castled. So a whole point of me swapping off the pawns, as I recall, was just to open this file for my rook for when I've castled. So fine. And then my opponent plays knight to C3, goes back, which is an odd move because it was perfectly safe there. And computer's saying slight advantage to black. Lovely. And that's because my next move, D5. Well, what have we got here? If I offered you as black a half open file for your rook, complete dominance of the center of the board, Not that, because I don't know what arrow that was. Your two knights in ideal positions, your bishop's ready to go, and your opponent still hasn't even castled. You'd bite my arm off. So this couldn't have gone any better so far. And my opponent plays d4. He's got to try and gain some presence in the center. And actually, these days, the old veteran that I am, I would definitely play the top move that the computer's recommending. Well, actually, it's changed its mind. No, it hasn't. It's gone back to e4. I would definitely play this because I'm clearly going to attack on this side of the board. And so I'd want to close the center, just block the center up so that I can attack safely. But back in the dark, distant past of 1996, I played pawn takes pawn, which isn't awful. It's not awful at all. Knight takes d4, knight takes d4. And yeah, it's basically now a level game. My opponent at the time took with the queen, however. So just allows me to maintain a slight advantage. Queen takes d4. And I played c6, which is pretty natural. I think you just want to blunt this bishop. I would imagine that's what was going through my head. And tiny advantage to black, but it's basically level. So far, so good. My opponent casts, my opponent castles on the queen's side. Totally understandable. You don't want to be over here because that's where my attack's coming. And yet the computer says that's not a good move, which is interesting. And it recommends knight g4 as the top move, which is what I played. So I've now got the use of my half open file. I've got the use of my open bishop, and I'm attacking this potential weakness. So knight to g4, my opponent plays bishop f4, which looks like it might be spoiling my fun because everything seems to be protected and he's blocked the file. So, okay. And I play bishop f6 to get rid of the queen. I logically, if the queen isn't on this diagonal, then I can play knight takes f2 anyway, and then I'm forking the two white rooks. Great, okay. So my opponent plays queen to c5, presumably to stay on that diagonal. And I now make what the computer thinks is a mistake, but I thought was a good, well, I say a mistake, it's there, it's the third best move, but I played bishop takes. And I calculated that if takes, I just have ruined my enemy's, it's not my enemy, it was my friend, but in chess terms, my enemy's pawn structure. And if you go queen takes c3, then surely knight takes f2 is just forking the two rooks. Great news, happy days. So I played bishop takes c3. And my opponent took back. Bear with me, and then play queen b6. Now the computer thinks I should have played queen to here instead of taking on this square, but I mean, I don't really understand it. This just looks like a horrible pawn structure. So queen to b6 I've played, queen e7 from my opponent, and knight takes f2. What could be more natural? I've got what I wanted, and suddenly I'm losing. Oh, well, this is because I missed something, and luckily for me, so did my opponent. And what I missed and what he missed is the move bishop e3, which simply attacks the knight, but more importantly, attacks the queen. So I suddenly don't have my fork. And yeah, it's a bit of a mess. If I just say I go queen here, you then have all sorts of nasties coming in here. What happens if you take, for example? Well, you walk into bishop takes d5 check, and if you run away to the corner, you're getting mated. Oops. So this isn't very nice at all. But luckily for me, if I can just go back to the right spot, after I played knight to f2, knight takes f2, my opponent didn't quite spot the right move order and actually played rook takes d5 straight away, which doesn't work, but he had exactly the same idea. So I take, he takes, and he thinks, again, if I play king here, then the same applies. I'm getting mated, but now I've got a move that I can put in the way, and I found it, bishop to e6. So I sack the bishop, but now because the rooks are connected, he hasn't got queen takes. And so slight advantage to black now. My opponent, just trying to remember what he played, looking back at my score sheet, I think he took, yeah. So plays bishop with e6 with check, king to h8. Finally gets this rook away, rook to e1. I play rook a e8, so I've got lovely rooks in the middle of the board. And it's all looking very nice. Thank you. Queen to d7 from my opponent. Knight to g4 is quite crafty, because if you play bishop takes knight, I've got rook takes rook. So obviously he's far too good to fall for that. He plays bishop to d6, and this looks really, really scary. But as you can see, the computer's saying, nah, black's absolutely fine. And I played knight to f6. And in this position, although I'm definitely better as black, I actually accepted my opponent's draw offer, and I wrote in my notes that I only have 1 minute left for the next 7 moves. And as I was playing somebody who, at least on paper, was a stronger player than me, I thought it was safer just to take the nice half point rather than risk playing on. But if I'd had, say, 10 minutes to make those next 7 moves, to get to the time control, you have to play 30 moves in an hour or whatever it was. I just didn't want to risk it. But clearly black is better in this position. You're 10, 19, 22, 26 against 40, against 25. So you're a pawn up anyway, or a point up. You've got this disaster of a pawn structure. The white king is a bit drafty. And although this all looks very scary, there's not really any threats. So that is the first game I was going to show you with the Latvian. Although it technically ends in a draw, black is doing very, very well, and was doing very well for the whole game. So let's flick the page, 2 pages, and show you the next game from the same tournament, funnily enough. So let's get the analysis board up, and we'll flip the board. And so this was playing against one of my best friends from school, funnily enough, and we'll have more than one game against this player in this little video. So e4, e5, knight f3, f5. And he played bishop to c4. And of course, I'd been studying the Latvian Gambit, so I knew the theory on this. I knew this is okay. Look, point 4, if you know what you're doing, it's okay. It's no worse for black than any other opening. And in the next game, you'll see that I actually found an improvement on fe4. But here, this was what I'd memorized from my book, and I knew what was coming. So here and here, the book I'm referring to, by the way, is The Latvian Gambit by Tony Costin, who I can't remember if he's a grandmaster or an international master, but anyway, I bought this book 30 years ago and read it, studied it, and thought I'd give the Latvian Gambit a go. So great book. Thank you, Anthony Costin. So queen to g5. So all this looks horrible, and I'm just going to ignore it and go and be horrible over there. At least that's the plan. So my opponent plays d4, which is the top engine move. Can't say that I blame them. Releasing the bishop to attack my queen. And I play queen g2. And here comes queen h5. Now this looks utterly terrifying. Utterly terrifying. But the computer is saying white slight advantage at best. It looks vile. It isn't. You can't be playing moves like the knight, the king across, because you're just going to walk into, for example, bishop here or knight here. Just no. You do have to play g6, which is what I did, and then bishop f7 and king d8. And now my opponent makes a mistake that my opponent in the next game makes exactly the same mistake. The correct move here, even though it's completely against the spirit of the Latvian Gambit, is to play queen to g5, check, and just force the exchange of queens. Oops, no, queen there and bishop there. And just accept that you have a slightly better position. But when you've got this and this and this, and the black king looks trapped, and this is coming in, my goodness, it must be very tempting to do what my opponent did in the game. Takes, and just sacrifice the rook. But it doesn't work, as you can see, because the bar has just disappeared off up here and is saying advantage black. I'm going to have it. There's a free rook, king to e2. And now I play a really, really good move, and it's the only move. And this is where the preparation comes in from the book, because I knew this whole attack is very, very dangerous unless you create an escape square. And so you have to play c6. And there's some lines in this I remember from the Costin book where the king ends up sort of over here and you play b5. And oh my God. But c6, you have to create an escape square. And so even after the scary looking bishop g5, now you can see the computer says, actually, black's fine. So my opponent didn't play that anyway. He played knight to c3. And complete advantage to black, as long as you carry out the plan and play king c7. I say complete advantage. The black king c7 is good, but I didn't play it. I played queen g2, which is just a horrible blunder. Oops. And fortunately for me, my opponent lets me off the hook. Classic Latvian Gambit, by the way, that even the computer doesn't quite know what's going on unless you let it really look at the position for quite a while. It's too wild. But my opponent played bishop to e4. Or bishop takes e4. It's not the strongest move, not by a long shot. And queen to g7 is basically forced. Knight f7 check. It looks terribly scary, doesn't it? But king to c7, 3 moves too late. Knight takes rook. What could be more natural than taking the rook? And there goes the analysis bar all the way back to level. Knight takes rook is no good. It's not the best move. After queen takes knight, black can get pretty nicely untangled. There's 4 pieces here against 3 pieces. Whoops. And of course, white hasn't really won a rook in the corner because we took their rook earlier. So actually this position now, computer's saying pretty much dead level. Let's see where it develops. So my opponent takes here because the bishop's defending that square. Immediately the computer says advantage black. I mean, it's something else, the Latvian Gambit. You look at this and you think, yep, I'm winning a pawn. Great, I'll take the pawn. And then the computer laughs at you and says you're rubbish. Queen h7, bishop h7, knight f6. Okay, so we're finally developing our knight. Bishop to g6 and d5. So what have we got? From all of this, what we've got is basically I've got an extra knight and he's got 2 extra pawns. So as long as I can get these pieces into the game reasonably quickly, it's just comfortably winning for black. I've lost my spot. Hang on. So he plays f3, presumably wants to stop my knight getting to these squares. Bishop to h3 is quite a nasty move, obviously, because, you know, starting to have ideas of attacking the enemy king. Bishop to g5 from my opponent, attacking my knight, but I can defend it and develop my other knight at the same time. Rook g1 from my opponent, bishop to d6, and finally my rook has got a purpose in life, which it's going to demonstrate in a minute. King to f2, I don't quite get why that was played, but anyway it was, and rook to g8. So one of these bishops has got to move. Bishop takes f6 is played, knight takes f6 is played, the bishop retreats back to d3, bishop h2 from me, and rook takes and knight takes, and my opponent played king e3, and then as soon as I put that move on the board, just resigned because they were in trouble anyway. But now when the king gets out of check, king d2 for example, king e2, we're just winning here. We've got an extra piece, a whole extra piece with no compensation at all. So that's an interesting game with the Latvian Gambit that was absolutely fine right up to the point where here I just c6. No, I got c6 right, and then just didn't play the correct next move. Okay, fine. But I love the way the computer in a minute will change its mind on this. It's saying black's winning comfortably. If you leave it to run, after a while, it will say it's actually pretty level. But you have to let the computer study it. It's very complicated, this opening. So the next one I'm going to show you is one of my best ever games, although I still managed to nearly throw it away at the end. And this is against a guy who is still, I believe, active on the English tournament circuit even now. There's another junior player. His rating now is way, way, way over 2,000. He's probably closer to 2,300 ELO. But obviously at the time we were playing, not quite so much, but he was still probably the best junior in the county. And so, yeah, this is a Sunday, a rapid play tournament. I actually won the tournament with 5.5 out of 6. And this game was the game that settled it. So quite a nice, quite pleasing. I think from memory, it was 25 minutes each for the game. So some of these slight inaccuracies later on in the game are forgivable. And the first thing that we've got is exactly the same as you saw in the previous game. After I played the previous game, this was about a month later, I obviously went away and did a bit of study and what can I do to improve? And I came up with, courtesy of Coston's book, this idea. Now, Coston, if memory serves, only gives a sort of a brief look at b5 as an option because, you know, the computer says it's pretty good for white. But actually, I quite liked it because it does two things. The first thing is it gives you a chance to get the bishop out. And the second thing I thought about was if I'm going to have to march my king this way, do you remember in the last game I created a hole here? I've then actually got a second escape square for the king. So that's what we tried. We tried this like wild move b5. And in this game, my opponent decided they wanted to stay on this dangerous diagonal and play bishop to b3. So now the moves become exactly the same as the last game, but with the difference that the bishop's not on c4 and my pawn's on b5. Everything else is the same for the next few moves. So takes, queen to g5, d4, exactly the same, unleashing the attack from the bishop to the queen. Queen to g2, or queen takes g2, I should say. Queen to h5, check. Here it comes again, this horrible, scary looking attack on my king that actually isn't all that devastating after all. Queen h5, you have to play g6. We know this because we did it in the last game. Bishop to f7, check, supported by the knight. Yeah, it's exactly what we saw in the last game. King to d8, and my opponent plays exactly the same mistake. Once again, the computer's saying queen to g5, check, supported by the bishop, and make black swap queens, and then white just has a slight advantage. But it's so easy to get tempted into doing what my opponent did. And for the second game in a row, a very strong player went greedy and thought that this would be just too strong. As you can see, -8. No, it just doesn't work. The attack just isn't completely winning, and even a computer is saying that. So I'll take the rook. Thank you very much. Don't mind if I do. King e2. And now the other really important difference. See, in the previous game, you had to play c6 in this position because you needed a bolt hole for the king. But here we've got an extra option, and it's this move here. Because of the pawn moving to b5, we can release the bishop and give my king this route out. So bishop to a6 is what I played. Bishop g5, check. And I guess my opponent must have looked at this and thought, well, I must be winning here. Look at this attack. Nope. King c8, we're running. Off we go. Knight to c3. And that's to bring another piece into the attack. And b4, check. Has it checked? Well, remember, it's discovered attack from the bishop that we developed. So the king has to go somewhere. Look at this, is -12, by the way. This is completely winning for black, completely winning. King to e3 from my opponent, and I get to win another rook. I'm not scared, I'm having it. You might think this attack is dangerous. I know better because I've done my study. It isn't. It just isn't. It should be, but it isn't. So queen takes a1. I think the next move, just checking back to my book, yeah, bishop to e4. So my opponent goes here. Now, this is really tricky. It's not so much the attack on the rook that's scary. It's the fact that it cuts off my escape square. And so now, if my opponent gets to play queen e8, we're getting checkmated because we can't run. So I could play c6 and create that same square as last time. But I actually found and played in the game, which I'm very, very proud of. I think it's a double exclamation mark move, but then I'm biased, obviously, is this, just casually sacrificing the knight. Because now you can't play queen here because the knight gets to this square. And we're already so far up on material, being 2 rooks up, that to save the game, just sacking the knight is fine. So, yeah, knight to f6 was played, and my opponent, not surprisingly, took it. And sorry, bear with me, I just lost my place in the book. So I've got a book of all my games from years ago. Queen 01, queen 01, rookie 5. I think I'm Bishop e4, queen e1 check. Yeah, I'm missing a move. That's why it doesn't look quite right. Bear with me a sec. So after queen takes a1, bishop e4, I actually have just missed a move. We actually have queen e1 check first and king to f3, and now the knight f6 move, which is still, for exactly the same reason, is still a very, very decent move. Okay, so knight to f6, bishop takes, and now we play bishop to, queen to h1. It's such a confusing game that even now, looking at my notes, I'm still getting muddled. King to f4, it's got to go somewhere. And now bishop h6 check. And this is a nice little move because you can't take it. If you play queen takes, queen to c1 is check. And when the king moves, wherever it's going to go, we just go queen takes queen. So bishop h6 check, you can't take the bishop. So my opponent goes king to f5, and look at the state of this position. I mean, in all seriousness, white's lost both rooks. There's what looks like it should be an absolutely devastating attack coming in the middle of the board. And the king's on f5. Look, what's it doing here? And -5, says the computer. It actually says it's winning for black as long as black doesn't do anything stupid. Well, I still haven't done anything stupid. I actually go here, threatening queen here, which is checkmate. I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? Absolutely crazy. And my opponent, knight to d5, yet another piece, misclick there, coming into the attack. And this also defends the checkmate square. So queen f4 is no longer a checkmate. Knight to c6, let's actually finally develop these last two pieces. And I'm happy to give up the rook anyway at this point. Now, the computer says it's only -3.5 here. So I wonder if it thinks knight c6 is the best move. Now it thinks I should actually play c6. But I mean, knight c6 is still -4. It can't be bad. So knight to c6, bishop takes rook. We're giving up the rook. And now, after this whole game of really, really very good chess, I think, but it is, computer agrees, I actually blow it at the last minute, and I'm really lucky to get away with it. Computer's saying just play probably king to b7, just get out of dodge, just get your king safe, get out of the way, hide. It's also saying bishop e2, which is quite a nice little trick. Bishop e2 is playable because if queen takes, then knight here is actually check, and then you just play knight takes queen. So bishop e2 is quite a nice move. But that's not what happens. What actually happens, yeah, is bishop here. So bishop takes, and then I play knight d4. And suddenly the bar goes whoosh. And if my opponent picks the right next move, there are only two legal moves. One of them gives him the advantage. The other one gives me the game. The king can only go to g4 or f6, excuse me, sorry, from this check. There's only two places he can go. And thankfully for me, I don't have to say I blew the entire game because he went the wrong way. He went to g4, and -22 tells you all you need to know. And then I get to play bishop to e2 check, which still isn't the best move, by the way. Queen g1 is better, but bishop e2 is -7. It's still good. Knight to f3, he blocks. Bishop to f3. Yeah, bishop f3, and then I think after knight to f3. Sorry, again, I have to look at my notes just to remind me what's going on. At this point, I think he resigns because you can't play king here because queen here check, and then you can just pick up the queen. So what a wild game. I nearly managed to completely blow against, to say, one of the top juniors in the country, never mind the area. That was kind of cool with the Latvian, although I'd say nearly blew it. Now, what's the next one that I want to go to here? Yep, 73 in my book. Let's have a little look at this one. Flick through. Okay, so junior players, when I was around, we all used to carry around a little scorebook because you had to, as part of the rules, note down the moves in your games. So, of course, I've still got some of my scorebooks. So here we go in this one. Let's see what happens in this one, because It's a 21 move game, and the last couple of moves in this look terribly like either a puzzle rush, if you've played Puzzle Rush on chess.com, or like one of Dr. Dave's positions from his book that I've been making in the other playlist. So here we go. So I'm black, obviously, and this is February 1996. So okay, knight f3, f5, bishop c4, and by now I'm really quite enjoying my b5 move. My opponent in this game tries something else, tries bishop takes, rook takes, and d4. Now there's some horrible tactical mistakes in this game, as you're going to see, but that doesn't surprise me because the Latvian Gambit is just going to be riddled with tactical mistakes. It always is. D6 and queen h5 check. This move happens all the time. It's okay. It actually turns out that in this instance, it gives an advantage to black. Ridiculous that such a natural looking move should actually be advantage to black. And g6 is the only move. We play it. And knight takes. And now I nearly managed to blow the game. Immediately, you should play rook takes here with a comfortable advantage, -2, -3. I actually played this, which is a shocking move because after queen to d5, both rooks are unprotected and both rooks are forked, are attacked. Fortunately, not only did I not notice it, but neither did my opponent. The Latvian Gambit will do that to you. And he decided to just attack one rook. So thankfully, he gifted it straight back to me, and the rest of the game is pretty comfortable stuff. So rook g7, queen h8, queen e7, queen h6. He's just doing a little dance around the board over here with his queen. Knight to c6. I'm not looking too closely at the analysis because I'm pretty sure there's no more mistakes in this game now. c3, b4. Castles from our opponent. Bishop to f5. Rook to e1, rook to h7 because it's protected by the queen. So we're going to start attacking on this half open file. Lost my place. Queen to e3, queen to h4. So we're threatening all sorts of nasties here. h3 is played to block it, but you can already now see that at some point this is going to get sacrificed. You can see it coming. Bishop to h6, attacking the queen. So let's get another piece into the game. My opponent drops back to e2. You've got to do it. And bishop takes bishop. And I don't quite know why my opponent doesn't play rook takes bishop. I mean, in either case, it's still -7. I can only imagine he was terrified of the consequences of this coming down here. I imagine that's the case. Because in the actual game, he played queen c2, which is even worse. But, you know, it's already a bit of a mess. So queen to c2 is played, and then e3, because you can't play pawn takes pawn because queen takes rook. And so now this looks really, really unpleasant. Queen takes c1, and this is where it becomes puzzle rush. How do we solve? Well, it's not quite puzzle rush because the first move's pretty obvious. But queen takes here is check, protected by that. King to the corner, and now rook takes here is check. Pawn takes is pretty much forced. It's the only move. And bishop here is mate. So, yeah, aside from both me and my opponent somehow managing to miss that fork earlier in the game, a pretty nasty, pretty conclusive one there. So I'm just flicking through the list of games in this book, see if we've got any more that are worth a look. I think there's one more. Yeah, there is 84 in this book, and I've got a second book. So 84. Now, this is interesting, this one, because this is literally 1 year to the day in exactly the same tournament against exactly the same player as one of the previous games. And this is the guy who I say is one of my best school friends, very strong player. And we got this. And bishop c4, exactly as we had before. Now, in the game, the year before, I took there. Obviously, now I know that we go here instead. and my opponent decided to try something completely crackers. So we've seen bishop takes, we've seen bishop back, and actually bishop takes pawn is probably playable, although the computer doesn't think much of it. What he plays is knight takes e5. So just merrily sacrificing a piece for the attack. And it doesn't work. I just take, we'll take the bishop. Queen to h5 check, in it comes, but without this help from the bishop on this diagonal, it just isn't going to do the job. g6, obviously, and knight takes g6 is the best move, and my opponent plays it. And now the trick now is not to recapture. Pawn takes, queen takes, h8 is pretty level, but what you should actually do is what I did. Knight f6 attacking the queen. And what on earth is she going to do? Well, my opponent played a queen takes f5. And I played d6. We're still delaying capturing the knight because we can attack the queen first. Just thinking, where did he go? Looking back at my book, yeah, queen to g5. And now we take king e7. d4 from my opponent, presumably to try and get the bishop in the game. But after rook g8, protected by the knight, he actually resigns, because where are you going to put your queen? This entire row is protected by my rook. The knight protects the rook himself. You can't go here because of the knight. You can't go here because of the bishop. You can't go here because of the knight. And you can't go here. After all that, you can't go here because of the bishop. So he just drops his queen. That's brutal. So yeah, that was a nice little one for the Latvian. Now I've got some more. As you can tell by now, I was quite a fan of playing the Latvian Gambit. Now let's see. 19 in this book. I think that's was a game where me and my opponent both made just horrible. Yeah, this is not a good game by either of us. It was just riddled with errors. So we'll ignore that one and go to one that was interesting. I'm just trying to work out if this was a good game or not. As I say, this is all 25 years ago, and I'm just looking at my notes as we go along. I suppose we could look at this one. Why not? Why not? So this is 29th of November, 1996. I'm still 17 years old. I think there's some mistakes in this one. I don't think this is the best game you'll ever see. But whatever, let's see how it goes. So this is the McCluskey variation. Okay, and that's interesting as well, because I think in the video I did for Dr. Dave, I think I may have said that knight takes here and then knight c6 is the McCluskey variation. So I might have made a slight error in that, but I'll say after 25 years of not doing this, I think I can forgive myself. So knight to c3 is played. Knight to f6 is played. Knight takes e5, d6 to attack the knight. Knight goes back to f3, which is a mistake. It should go to c4. Going back to f3 is a mistake that will turn that black slight advantage to black, because fe4, we kick the knight again. Knight to d4 and c5. And black is very happy with life out of the opening here. I say that, the computers say, oh, well, okay, so slight advantage to white if they find the right. And in fact, no, it's almost level now. Look, I was going to say, I think this is perfectly good for black. So c5 are played, knight to b3 from my opponent, and bishop to e7. d4, as you would, opening up the middle of the board. And now I do make a mistake. I should be playing the en passant move here. So capturing the pawn en passant. What I actually played was b6. I can't remember why. I can't think what the reason was. I guess it's just to defend this square. I guess it was just to put more defense on this square. But again, it was 1996 and it's now 2021. So I can forgive myself not remembering. So bishop c4, bishop to b7 and bishop to e3. This is not the strongest game ever. But we'll look at it because it's the Latvian. a6. So obviously I want to play here and here. My opponent castles, d5, and now I think I'm doing all right, because after d5 he has to retreat the bishop, ping. And then we play c4, and we've got a really nice clamp on the position. Computer says it's basically level, tiny advantage at best, but I think this doesn't visually look nice. If you're playing the white pieces, this probably feels unpleasant. So knight to d2, and we get castled, not for the first time. One of the nice things about the Latvian is if you can get castled, your f-pawn will have gone, and you'll have a nice home for your rook. F3 from my opponent finds the best move. And I play b5, which the computer says is all right, but I just think I don't really know why I did it. I think pawn takes pawn is probably better. Yeah, computer saying pawn takes pawn is better, but I play b5. It's not disastrous. Opponent takes, I take. And then my opponent does something that's really weird. So this position is slight advantage to white, but nothing dramatic. You know, plus 0.6 is nothing dramatic. But he plays rook f4, which is just odd. Because it's completely exposed. It's not doing anything there. It's just a pointless move. All it's going to do is become a target for my pieces. And sure enough, bishop to d6, let's attack the rook. And then he puts it over to h4, where it's completely undefended and is in serious danger of running into an attack from my queen. And that's exactly what happens, knight to d5. So now my queen is attacking this rook, and he's got to do something to defend it. So he plays bishop to f2. And the computer is now saying that we're winning handsomely here, because you can just take away the defender. If you go takes, queen takes rook, you're just comfortably winning as black. I don't think I played that. No, I played knight takes c3, which is the second best move, and is still perfectly, not third best move, second best move. There it is. Perfectly okay, because it's attacking the queen. So it's got exactly the same idea. Pawn takes knight. But now I don't play rook takes pawn. I come up with the second best move again. I'm always playing the second best engine move. Maybe that's not so bad. E3 to try to get this into the game. My opponent then makes a big miscalculation, although it doesn't matter because he's losing anyway. Let's be honest here. The game is dead. So what happens? He can't play bishop takes pawn because queen takes rook. And so effectively, these two pieces are forked. The knight and the bishop are forked. For what he actually does after e3 is play here. And he thinks he's giving up his bishop for a pawn. So he thinks he can play king takes. But of course, if you play king takes, queen here is check. And the knight is pinned. You can't play knight takes queen. So he noticed that just in time. And instead of king takes pawn, played king to f1. But now this attack is... Oops, this attack is still happening, queen against the rook, and I just take away the defender. So bishop takes, queen takes, and he can have this rook up here. It really doesn't matter. Queen takes pawn, bishop to d5 check if you like. I can just hide in the corner. g4 was played, and then rook here. And there's actually nothing you can do to stop the checkmate, particularly here, next move. Literally nothing you can do, actually. It's just over. All you can do is put the bishop in the way on these two squares, and then after rook takes, this is just an unstoppable mate. So a nice ending to the game, even if it wasn't the best game of all time. I'm just going to hit pause recording a sec. All right, here's the next one. So this is from 1997, February 97 again. It looks like it was an inter-club game, and our opponent's rating was BCF 160. So I would say that is pushing towards 1900 ELO, so pretty strong. E4, E5, knight F3, F5. And this one's worth showing because our opponent produces yet another different way of playing against the Latvian with D4. And it's not one that black's terribly unhappy with. It's okay. I mean, it's, you know, it's not the critical way to respond, I would say. Takes, and knight f6. And my opponent plays bishop g5, which is perfectly logical, perfectly natural. d6 to attack the knight. Knight goes back to c4, which isn't actually the top engine move at all. I'm just trying to remind myself why the computer thinks you can play knight c3. Well, it's actually changed its mind and now thinks you can't play knight c3. I was going to say that looks a strange move. But in the game, my opponent played knight to c4. Bishop to e7, so we're just getting castle getting developed in castle. Bishop to e2, castles, castles. And from the opening, we've got a situation where black has a tiniest of advantages to the point where it's basically level. And I played c6. I don't quite know why I didn't play d5 straight away. There must be a reason why I played c6 first, but it doesn't make a huge difference. My opponent plays c3. Again, not quite sure why. I suppose he just wants to defend his center. And now bishop to e6. So I develop a piece while sort of attacking another one. It is defended. But I would have played, had I got the chance, bishop takes knight, bishop takes bishop, and then d5, because I'd have had all of my pawns on white squares, and my opponent would have had a white square bishop. So I would have done that. And then knight b to d2. So, okay, fine. And now d5. Knight to e5, knight b to d7. And I mean, if you're playing openings as black and after 12 moves you're minus 0.5, you're pretty happy with life. Knight b d7. And oh yeah, this is interesting. So my opponent now plays what the computer says is the best move. And my notes from 25 years ago, I said I thought this was a mistake. So he plays here, which my notes say I thought was a mistake because it gives me a protected passed pawn. But the computer says it's the best move, so who am I to argue? Knight takes, f takes e5, and now he has a protected passed pawn as well. But still looks okay. Knight to d7, top move, good, good. Bishop takes, queen takes. Queen to b3 from my opponent, trying to hit this unprotected pawn. Why not? Queen to g5 from me is the best move, however, so an exclamation mark move, and suddenly it's advantage to black. Opponent chooses to swap rooks for whatever reason, fine, no issue with that. But now he has a problem, and he has a problem with these two squares. How do you defend both the knight and prevent the queen check? Well, he finds the way. Knight to f1. So the knight moves out of danger and protects this square. And I again played 25 years ago, play the top engine move, h5. c4 from my opponent. He's trying to create some counterplay, and I again play the top engine move. 25 years ago, I wasn't bad at this for a kid, was I? Does he play the top engine move? Yes, he does. C takes d5, c takes d5, and then in this position that the computer says is level-ish, but maybe maybe black in some lines has a bit of an advantage. My opponent drops a clanger, a horrible blunder. Queen to e3. And it's a puzzle rush moment because what's happening is the only piece defending that queen from my queen is the knight. And so I just calmly played rook takes knight check, and my opponent resigned on the spot because he's blundered his queen. After whatever piece takes, you just play queen takes queen check and pick up the bishop. Well, actually, you don't pick up the bishop because he's going to go rook here. But either way, you're winning more than comfortably. So that was another nice one for the Latvian. Came out of the opening there very, very nicely. 2 more to go, 32, or maybe 2 more to go. I just want to go to them and see if they're actually any good. So this one is a 30-move game. Okay, yeah, why not? Let's have a look. Why not? Okay, yeah, we'll finish with these two because after these 2 games, I actually stopped playing local league chess. So there's something sort of historic about this, I suppose. So analysis, new board, flip. So this one is April 1998. So I'm 18 years old at this point. It's another local league game. I can't honestly remember anything about this. I'm just looking at my notes. Oh, I've got my record for the season. So I played 7 games with the Latvian Gambit in the local league in the season that we're talking about here. Won 4, drew 3, lost none. That's not a bad record, is it? Not bad at all. Right, let's have a look at this game. Can you tell yet that I've got a bit of a soft spot for the Latvian Gambit? Knight f3, f5, and knight e5. So finally an opponent plays Dr. Dave's recommended move. Queen to f6 is definitely black's best attempt. And my opponent plays the right next move, which is d4. d6, this is actually theory. We've actually got some opening theory taking place. F takes e4, knight to c3, queen to g6 to defend the pawn, and my opponent goes queen to e2. The correct move, and not surprisingly, the computer has found it at this point, is f3. My king is badly trapped in the middle of the board, more so than the white one, because he only has to get one piece out of the way to castle. And I think f3 is just the best move. But my opponent delays and plays queen to e2, putting a second attacker onto this piece. And so obviously I do something to defend it. I'm just reading my scorecard, knight to f6. And then my opponent makes what I've described as a big mistake in my notes. He plays g3, and I've put it's a big mistake because it just completely weakens all of these white squares. And it looks like the computer agrees with me, because I then play the top engine move, bishop g4, straight in on those white squares. Queen's attacked, has to go somewhere, e3, and bishop to f3. So we lock in the bishop, and this is just brutal all around the enemy king. Obviously, our opponent has to save their rook, so rook to g1. Bishop to e7, I'm planning on getting castled, presumably. Bishop to e2, my opponent makes an attempt to swap off this horrible, horrible bishop, which I can fully understand, but it's not going to work, because I've got a nice intermediary move. In as Zug, I attack the queen with knight g4. The queen has to go back, and then I can go knight takes here. And this now is just vile, because if bishop takes, knight takes is not only check, but it's also forking the queen, and just for fun, the rook as well. So that's not very nice. So we get to play knight takes h2. Just check everything's right. Yeah, and my opponent plays b3 because he's got to play something, so whatever. Did I just play? Yeah, once again, top engine move, bishop takes, queen takes, knight f3. King has to go somewhere because it's check here, and I assume king knight takes rook is best. Oh, it's not. So that's interesting, because at this point I just took the rook. I just grabbed the material, but that's only the third best move. Computer's actually saying that queen h5 is better. But I mean, you know, grabbing this and being basically -4 can't be an absolute mistake. So knight to g1, king takes g1, knight to c6, and yeah, position looks pretty good. Let's see how the game finished. Bishop to e3. I now castled, which is quite funny, because in my notes, not for the first time, I've put down that I should actually castle on the king's side, so that there's a rook straight away on this file. So my notes condemns my next move of castles queen's side, but the computer says it was actually the best move. Thanks, computer. You know how to make me feel good. d5 from my opponent, knight to b8, and knight to a5. Yeah, he's just creeping back into the game now, but it's still advantage black. Is it knight to a5? I can't read my writing. Yeah, knight to a5. Bishop to f6. So having dominated the white squares, we're now going to have a little go at the black squares. Look, that's a good move. Knight to b5. My opponent's going to ignore this rook in the corner now and see if he can checkmate me over here. Well, he can't. So I'll have the free rook. Thank you very much. Knight a7 check. King escapes. Queen to b5 check. And king escapes. We're running away again. Queen takes here. Rook to d7. We have to protect this square. And knight 5 to c6. Knight takes c6. Knight takes c6 check. And king f6. And at this point, we're doing very well. -7. Opponent played queen to b5. I can't quite understand why. I guess it's because maybe he's thinking he can move the knight somewhere and attack this loose rook. Perhaps that's the answer. I play queen to g4. I must have thought that was the answer, because look, I've immediately defended that piece. Knight to b8, rook to f7. Knight goes back to c6. So all he's achieved is help me to put my rook on a better square anyway, I would suggest. And then h5, which is the top engine move. It's quite strange looking back on me as a kid, how many times I actually found the top engine move. Mind you, I've thrown in plenty of stupid blunders as well, so I suppose I shouldn't crow too much. Check, takes, and then he overlooks that this is now a fork. And after this move, he resigned because I'm going to take the knight. So king here, queen here, and we're just 2 rooks up. Okay. I wonder if I've converted anyone to being ping to Latvian Gambit players now. We've got one more game to go, and then I am done with my shameless promotion of the Latvian Gambit. And this is November 1998 as well. So this is, yeah, it's another local league game, and I'm still 18 years old. Let's see how this one goes. Actually, it starts off very similar to the previous one. And then, hold on. Actually, it starts off very similarly to the previous one. Okay, right. So let's see. So here we go. E4, E5, knight F3, F5, knight takes. So this is the main line. No question, this is white's best effort, except that it's not, because my opponent now goes wrong. The correct move is D4 to support the knight, but my opponent goes immediately knight to C4, which actually, I mean, here I am saying it's wrong, but the computer says it's perfectly all right. I just think from all the times I played the Latvian Gambit, I think D4 is the best move. But how can I tell the computer it's wrong? It's better than me. So whatever, knight C4, F takes E4, knight to C3, attacking here. I think I actually then make a slight theory error. Yeah, I actually play queen to G6 in the game, but the right move from theory is, as the computer's just pointed, it's changing its mind all over the place. It's confused, but I think queen F7 is the right move from theory. I play queen to G6, G3 from my opponent. I guess he wants to go here and target the pawn. What did I play? C6. So I want to put my pawn here to secure my pawn chain. I guess that makes logic. And then he plays bishop E2, which is odd. I mean, having done that, you'd think that he was going to put the bishop there, but all right. Knight to F6, which again, maybe that's odd, because having done this, you'd think I was going to do that, but okay, let's develop a piece. It can't be bad to develop a piece. D3 from my opponent, and finally D5. So he then plays knight to D2, and I think that might throw the advantage away. Yeah, so before knight to D2, if he plays knight E5, he's attacking my queen. I play queen F5, and the game's pretty level. But knight to D2 that he plays actually gives me quite a decent advantage. Bishop to B4. I want to put my bishop onto this diagonal. Perhaps it's not the best place for it, but that's where I put it. What do we get? D takes E4 and bishop takes C3. So this is classic me, actually, as a junior. I really, really liked playing to ruin enemy pawn structures. I used to do a lot of it and then just try and win the endgames. So it doesn't surprise me that I've done that. And I assume I played D takes E4 instead of with the knight. Okay. And that's got to be a mistake, isn't it? Because that allows... Yeah, it's saying I should leave this pawn alone and get castle, because after this, bishop A3 is actually really unpleasant because you can't castle through check. So now I'm into a bit of a, got myself into a bit of a mess all of a sudden here. So H5, knight to C4. And the computer thinks white's absolutely loving life here. So I wonder how I managed to turn this one around. There must be a blunder coming. I can't honestly remember this game. Knight BD7, queen to D6. That's subtle. Threatening mate. King F7, yeah, run away, because now I can go around here. So king F7, knight E5, check. Oh my goodness, this just looks, yeah, it's a mistake. I was just going to say that looks wrong. And it is. So my opponent, this is where he throws it away. He's definitely got the better of it here. Should just castle queenside. But knight E5 is a mistake. And obviously I have to take, because otherwise I lose my queen. So knight takes, queen takes. And king G8 is my move. Yeah, computer's sort of got that as its top move. So go and hide, basically. Rook D1 from my opponent. Surely if you're going to put the rook on D1, you may as well just castle. and then the rook ends up on d1 anyway. But rook d1, and I've played king h7. Is that the best move? Well, it's the third best move, so it's okay. Hide. Bishop to c4 from my opponent. Rook to e8. Now this, yeah, that's the top move. So now we're starting to think the position's pretty good. We've got nice potential on these white squares again. We're eventually going to move that bishop, maybe get the other rook to the middle. We're gaining time on the enemy queen. This looks pretty good. What does he do? Queen to c7. We're just going to smash the center open here. Are we? e3. Yeah, e3 is the second best move. It might be about to become the best move. No, yes, it is. Oh, no, it's not. So the computer's not quite sure, but e3 is good. And my opponent then plays f4, which on my notes I've said I think is a mistake, and the computer doesn't like it. Yeah, it's clearly not. Yeah, f4 is not good. So this was played by my opponent. And I think I played bishop f5 here by the looks of it, which isn't one of the recommended moves. How bad is it? Yeah, it's still pretty good for black. It's not too bad. Bishop to f7, attacking my queen, because obviously it's defended by his queen, but I think it's an irrelevant move, really. It's just a single move threat. I can move away again nicely enough. I'm not really worried about this. I mean, losing a rook here is just, it's trivial, isn't it? There's so much potential now on the white squares. The king is loose here. Wow. What did we get? Rook e8, rook d8. So my opponent tries to swap rooks. Look at the computer saying -12. Wow. Rook to d8. Bishop takes c2. That's nice, because now if rook takes rook, queen here is actually checkmate. But unfortunately, my opponent was a bit too good to fall for that. And he castles in this position after all of this. Castles, but to be fair, it is the top move. And now e2. Rook to e1. What have I done? Did I take the rook? Yeah, takes. Queen to f3. And that's probably not, oh yeah, -10. It's still perfectly good. And queen to f3, queen e7. Bishop to e4. Oh, that's why I went there. Right. So because this just becomes unplayable now. Rook takes. Queen takes. And it says here my opponent lost on time, but I think we can look at the position and assume that it was not going to end well for him anyway. So a Latvian Gambit marathon. I can't pretend for 1 minute that it is completely sound at the top level. It isn't. But the people I'm aiming my videos at are not top level players. They're just enthusiasts who like to have exciting chess. The only thing you can't really do with this as black is risk it if you don't know what you're doing, because you'll get squashed, as you see in some of Dr. Dave's examples in the other videos. But yeah, so there we go. For all of my students who are watching this, you now have got to see me playing some of my tournament games when I was a youngster, and I have made myself happy by showing off the Latvian Gambit when it actually works. My old pet opening. I might go and play some bullet games now and just see if I can rekindle the old magic. I hope that was enjoyable. See you all later on for some more chess.